What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. Today we're going to have the dangerous conversation. Before we do so, I want you guys to know it's not personal. It's just something I've been observing, okay? We're not all in the same fandom. And yet we are, but yet we're not. It's not a bad thing necessarily. What happens is the confusion as a result becomes a bad thing. And this is just my opinion. This is just as a spectator, as a person that's part of it, looking around, checking the temperature, keeping kind of my eye on things. I mean, no disrespect to anyone personally. It's not a matter of what is better or what is worse. It's just a matter of maybe this is one of the reasons why we have issues. This conversation's been brewing a lot on Nerd Rage Radio recently, and I thought it was time to have it. But before we do so, we got to do some house cleaning. First and foremost, the New Age versus the Magic Square. Tons of people still in the comments saying you should do it with the upgrade, not listening to what I say in the video that there's no way I would ever do it with the upgrade. It doesn't make any sense. Then people saying, well, if you twist the toe this way, then it's better technically. Look, man, people will come up with any reason for their favorite dog to win the race. And I get it. Well, if you stand him on one foot and you yourself wear a ballerina outfit, he kind of resembles a ballerina and he kind of resembles you, so you guys are like one and the same, so you should probably get a point for that. Dude, get out of here. There's no perfect way to do this, right? It's just a matter of trying to kind of objectively weigh the two options, and I have to put my subjective spin on it in some regard because some of it is a matter of what looks good, and when you get into that, you get into opinions, and that's subjective, and there's no escaping it. I thought New Age was going to do better. I say at the end that I like New Age better as of toy, but the Magic Square does a lot of things well. If they could get their materials down pat, they would be a force to be reckoned with. There was somebody in the comments that said, yes, but we never hear about Magic Square stuff breaking. So that's something to talk about, right? There's a conversation there of what is worth. Like, is it worth something to feel like a chew toy for an animal and not break? And I know that's funny, but like, I don't really mean it to be funny. There's some real merit to that conversation, you know, without necessarily reducing things to the absurd or exaggerating them to a ridiculous extent, like making it a chew toy, like Shao Kahn's throne from Storm Collectibles. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. That also takes us to the MMC Blast-Off, which we got to comment on again. Apparently, they've been going to town on the forums and having all sorts of people saying that, like, if it's not Fans Toys, I trash it. But then 2 weeks ago, people were trashing me because I didn't love the Fans Toys products. Like, people will come up with anything just to say that I don't like it. It's got to be an excuse. It's got to be some reason. It's got to be that somebody's in my pockets, that somebody's backing me, that the Federal Reserve owns me, the WHO owns, like, everybody's he's controlling me. I'm just a puppet on the strings, and maybe I just don't like it, dude. I bought it with my money. It's not something I borrowed and looked at. It's something that I had a dog in the fight on. Sometimes I just don't like stuff, and then I tell you exactly why I don't like it, but it's never good enough. There's always got to be some conspiracy theory. Sometimes the truth is just much more simpler. Moving on to the Emperor, man. A lot of people were with me in those comments about that hood, man. It's the biggest smack in the face to a collector community that I've ever experienced. Like, I'm contemplating not supporting any Bondi products anymore. I really am, because I'm just so irritated at that decision. So for all the people that were upset in the comments, my heart and soul is with you. And lastly, the dummies thing. There was one thing that kept coming up. Paul C had a really great point in the comments there, but there was some confusion as to the conversation where Laura and Jisk were kind of on one side of the argument and Robert and I were on the other. And the nuts and bolts of that debate there is that Jisk and Laura are making the argument that it doesn't matter if scalpers buy the stuff because Hasbro doesn't care as long as the products get bought and the kind of market value goes up, right? Robert and I's counter argument is that over time you will see people become fed up and leave that collection, and as a result the scalpers won't buy as much because the supply demand will be ultimately affected, and then at that point Hasbro will care. There was a lot more moving pieces to that conversation that I think people picked up on necessarily, and that might have been my fault from an editorial standpoint, but I just want to explain that. Yes, we agree. Immediately there will be no change. What we're saying is that over time it will affect change. It will be negative. All right. Lastly, merch of the week. This week we had the Sherpa blankets. These are my like mid-level blankets. So I got the plush that are my least expensive, I got the woven that are my most expensive, and then I have this, which are kind of in the middle. Have tons of designs. If you're interested in any of them, please hit me up on any of the socials or emails or whatever. All that stuff is in the description of this video. A portion of the proceeds go to a family that lost their father/husband to cancer this year. I'll be making that donation in December. Hopefully in plenty of time for them for the holidays. So with that being said, I have these designs plus many more. If you're curious about any of them, hit me up on the side and we'll get it sorted. Thank you to everyone that has made purchases and supported up until this point. I think after this week, we're going to take a break on the merch of the week for a while. Come back maybe in November. And with that, let's get into the conversation. So we've kind of noticed this kind of trending thing happening more and more with toxic fandoms. Fandoms are becoming becoming toxic, and it's obviously a problem, right? If you look at what is done to Star Wars fandom, it's just completely ripped it apart. There's people that can't take an ounce of criticism and throw the blame on everything from sexism to anything else other than take the criticism, and then on the other side, there's people that think that everything is related to sex and race, and as a result, these two sides of the fandom have just come completely polarized and can't get along for 2 seconds. But this problem is really much more multifaceted, at least in Transformers, than many people would care to admit. We all know there's toxicity in this fandom, but it's nowhere near as bad as Star Wars, but it's nowhere near as good as some of the other communities that I'm familiar with. So the question is why, right? And the answer is many reasons. Allow me to try to break it down, at least my observations from the outside looking in, or really from the inside looking out, looking back in. One of those reasons is going to be the internet, right? The internet is a tool that connects many people using footnotes. Listen, it's a Jay and Silent Bob reference for those in the know. The internet has allowed us all to voice opinion. Prior to that, not everybody got to hear everybody's opinions, but now we're all together, and we're together with people that we might not necessarily normally surround ourselves with, and as a result, all those opinions are sort of presented equally, although they may not be of all equal value and merit. Now, some would say, well, all opinions have value and merit, and I will say once again that no, they do not. All valid opinions have value and merit, but there are some that do not. I could have the opinion that this was orange juice. That opinion has no merit, it has no value, because it's not a valid opinion. Now, who is it up to validate an opinion? Well, that's an even stickier trap that I'm going to avoid, because I think that's even more complicated than we have time for today. But all of these opinions are now on the equal playing field, which is the internet. So that's part of what is causing this trickle-down effect of issues. Part two is going to be demographics. Now, demographics relating back to everybody being on the same playing field, everybody being equal, everybody having a level opinion that is valued across the board at a same exchange rate, as it were. But the thing is that our demographics are so different. If you look at the social circles that you're in, it probably consists of people that are kind of in the same place in life. Whereas in a Facebook group or an internet forum, it's me, the almost 40-year-old collector with a family and a job and a mortgage, and I'm at a particular place in life. But I am now having an exchange with a 16-year-old that's just gotten into it, that now loves the Siege line or Earthrise line, that is living under his parents' roof, perhaps still living on an allowance. But him and I are now in the same playing field, having an exchange where we are meant to hold each other's opinion at equal places. But the problem is that we're not really in the same fandom. We're both fans of Transformers, but we're not doing the same thing. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. It's just going to add to the confusion of how we communicate with one another. And that's my final point, that we're not in the same fandom, although we're a fan of the same thing. So let me try to break this chart down further. And we're just talking about the collector aspect, because there are people that are just into the comics, there's people that are into the shows, there's tons of different stuff. We're going to talk about the collecting aspect. Toys, action figures, physical 3D collectibles. So what do we have? We have the Chug collector. We have the third-party collector. From the third-party collector, we have the Legends collector, the Chug collector, and the Masterpiece collector. Speaking of which, we have the Masterpiece collector. And we have the specialty collector. Person that does flame toys or 3A or anything in that pocket. And then lastly, we have the statue collector. These are people that are spending an insane amount of money, in my opinion, on statues. Majority of them are Bayverse related. However, there is some other stuff as well. I, for instance, have the Imaginarium Art Soundwave, of course. And I want that Grimlock. So then now you have all of these fans participating in the same conversation, arguing about what is best. And they're arguing because they're not doing the same thing. They're not collecting the same thing. They're not in the same fandom. Chug is better than MP. MP is better than Chug. Third party is better than official. Official is better than third party. Flames Toys is better than MP. MP is better than Flames Toys because it transforms. 3A is better than Zeta. 3A is better than Toy World. Toy World's better than 3A because it transforms. And it leads to anger, anger, anger. On top of that, we throw in confusing elements. Why? Because it's conflicting. It's coming down to a number of things. You have people that want stylized looks of things, arguing with people that want visual, literal translations. You have people that want more at a cheaper price versus people that want less at a more expensive price. You have people that want things to transform. You have people that don't care if they transform. They're not collecting the same thing, but they're engaged in the same conversation. If that wasn't confusing enough, there are other things that make it more confusing. KOs, for instance. I've already told you my opinions on KOs. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but what does the KO confuse? It confuses the price point and the customers of which are being brought to the yard for those price points. If you have someone that's used to buying a $30 to $50 thing and something is offered at $100 and then the KO comes at the $30 to $50 price point, you've now just invited a whole new group of people to that game. Now those people are engaging with conversations with this people where normally they wouldn't necessarily be talking about the same thing. But it's not just there. There's other stuff. There's stuff that's confusing price point wise. Take the Victory set that was the Warpath, the Brawn, and the Huffer. It was 3 of those for $100. That's not necessarily an MP price point. That's a Chug price point. So you had Chug people that were buying it because they're used to buying things at that price point. The MP people were dipping in too, and now both of them are confused as to what that product is supposed to be for. This doesn't just happen there though. It happens on the flip side. Take MMC's reformatted line, which is a Chug line meant to initially kind of supplement the Generations line when they were dipping their toes into IDW. At first, things seemed pretty much equal except for the price point. But it's hard to explain to someone who bought that Springer, which is still, in my opinion, one of Hasbro's best offerings to date, and ask them why they should pay 5 times as much for this Whirl that is not one of my favorite things to date from that company. But then you have things on the flip side where you have figures like their Hot Rod or Drift that does explain why, if you were to really maneuver that figure, it's not the same as this Drift and why you're paying more. But sometimes it would take having both in order to see that lane. But now those two folks are engaged in the same conversation because they've flipped on the target audience. The Titan figures get even more confusing because now these are figures being offered to the Chug collector who's usually spending between 15 to maybe $50 on a bad day on a figure, now having to entertain the idea of spending $100+ on a figure. So now they're coming to the market with one perspective, whereas somebody like myself that's usually spending $100 on a figure, if not more, when it comes to Transformers, is buying that figure as well, but our expectations are different because our experiences with Transformers at that price point are different. It doesn't make one better than the other. It's a matter of preference. It only gets confusing and turns negative when we start arguing with each other when we're not interested in the same things. We're only interested in the same brand, not the same fandom. The uppercut that kind of brought me to this conversation is, where are the statue guys? Why is it that we never see the people that are buying XM statues or Prime 1 statues of Transformers or Imaginarium Arts that are exclusively Imaginarium Arts collectors, or even the Pop Culture Shock stuff? Why do we never see those guys throwing mud and digging graves for fellow fans in these Facebook groups or on these forums? Because they're not in the same fandom. When somebody is buying a $15 or $20 Chug, you're not going to be able to have a real conversation about why your value is better than the person that just spent $2,000 on a statue. They're never going to see the value here. And you're never going to see the value here. You're doing different things. The person that bought the Lamborghini doesn't care about your Civic. Now me, as a person who owns a Civic, knows that the person that bought the Lamborghini doesn't care about what they're paying at the gas pumps. We're not buying cars for the same reasons. This sort of spreads throughout most avenues of life. It's just the fact that it's underneath this title that makes it confusing. The Star Wars Hot Toys collector is not going to have a real conversation over what's better for their price point with the 3 3/4 collector. Although with the way these vintage collection prices are going up, maybe it's coming. And it doesn't make one bad or one good. It's just a matter of what they're looking for in their purchase. That's not the point. The point is that they're not engaged in the same conversation. Whereas with Transformers, I feel like it's more confusing because I feel like somehow we are all engaged in the same conversations with the exception of the statue guys. And as a result, we end up kind of throwing a flag in the ground and picking a side and having like an elite kind of attitude about it. Mine is better than yours is inferior to mine, and it creates this divide and we start hating each other, or at least online hating each other. I would doubt that most people that hate each other online even understand what hate is. But the point is, it's only because the internet exists that those two people would be engaged in that conversation in the first place. The natural order of things, the natural way of things would never get those two people in a room together to talk because they're not interested in the same thing. They're not part of the same fandom. They love the same brand. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.